So what we're going to do, we're going to start off with the raycast, then we're going to create a controller to control what item we'll pick up. We'll have a controller to control all the functionality to update the UIs, and then have a damage area, so when you land in that damage area, will do damage to your health. So we'll start off with the actual raycast. So what we can do is if you're using this, you can use the already pre-built one, or you can create your own. So what I'm going to call this is, I'm going to call this player raycast. We're going to open up in Visual Studio. We'll delete the first starting methods, and what we're going to do is have a serialized field in square brackets, have private integer, and have this as ray length equal to 5, so it's the length of the raycast itself. Then another square brackets serialized field, layer mask, and have this layer mask interact as something we're going to create, and then another square bracket serialized field, and we'll have this as layer mask again, and then we'll have layer to exclude as our name. Then we'll have a private variable, and we're just going to call this item controller, which we haven't created yet, and we're just going to call this our raycasted object. Then we're in square brackets just below here, we're going to have another serialized field and say private image. This is going to be our crosshair that we're going to use. Then at the top we need to use a namespace to access the UI, so we're say using Unity engine.ui. Then we'll have a private bool, and we'll call this is crosshair active with a semicolon at the end, and a private bool do once, and I will go through these as we're going. So we're going to write this in a update method, so then we'll have 2 brackets after that and 2 curly brackets, and we'll start by writing our raycast, and we'll say that raycast with a capital hit, and then we'll have a lowercase hit afterwards because we're just creating a local variable. And we're going to say vector3, and then we're going to have a name for another local variable, and then we're going to say transform with a lowercase dot transform direction with an uppercase, and then in brackets vector3 dot forward, and then have a semicolon at the end. And then we'll write integer mask equal to 1, and we'll say that less than or less than layer mask to exclude. Dot value, we want one of these line values which is hold shift and it's between the Z and the shift key. That's usually if we're going to do something or something else, but this is to compare 2 types of bits that we're going to use. So we'll have a layer mask interact dot value with a semicolon. So what this is doing is it's saying that we're setting a local variable called mask, setting it equal to 1, and we're checking between 2 values of the layer mask to want to exclude and the layer mask that we want to interact with, so it allows us to exclude certain layers if we want to, or find one that we want to particularly use. So then under there we'll say if physics dot raycast open brackets transform with a lowercase dot position with a comma fwd with a local variable, then out hit comma ray length comma mask, and then we'll have 2 brackets, then we'll have 2 curly brackets below there, and we'll say that if hit dot collider dot compare tag in brackets in quotes is pickup, then we'll have 2 curly brackets below there, and we'll say that if do once is equal to false by what we put in those brackets, and we'll say that raycasted object is equal to hit dot collider dot game object dot get component, and then in the angular brackets we'll say the item controller, which we haven't done yet so it won't find it, and then 2 brackets and a semicolon. Then we'll say crosshair change in brackets true, and we're going to create this in a second. Then under here, if we find the object, that we'll say that is crosshair active is equal to true, and do once is also equal to true because we found the object, so we don't want to do anything yet. And then we also want to say if input dot get mouse down in quotes, and we can put 0 for a left mouse click, then 2 curly brackets left and right. We'll say that the raycasted object dot, and then we need to call a function that we might want, so I will just quote that out for now until we create our other script. And what we'll do with 3 curly brackets down, we're just going to write an else statement because it'll be encapsulated to our original if statement, which was the raycast. So else, if we're not going to find the object, we need to say that if the crosshair is true and it is actually active, then we can set it to false if we're not looking at it. So we can say that crosshair change in brackets false because we're about to create that, and do once is also equal to false. And then below here, 3 down, we can also say that void crosshair change, we'll have it as a boolean, set that to on, have 2 curly brackets below, and say that if on and do once are equal to false, then 2 curly brackets will say that the crosshair dot color is equal to color dot red with a semicolon, and then under here we'll say else with 2 brackets and crosshair dot color is equal to color dot white, and then we'll say that is crosshair active is equal to false. So essentially what we're doing is we're creating a raycast, we're checking to see if pickup is in front of the raycast. If it is, then we're making sure that if do once is equal to false, then we'll check for the item and find the item controller on it. We will automatically set is crosshair active and do once equal to true, because then we've already interacted with an object, just so we won't check this lots and lots of times. If we left click, once we've found this object, we can then do something on that script. If not, if we look away from it, we'll set the crosshair to false, and we'll change the colors accordingly. Now I will just comment that out just so that we don't see that anymore. Back into Unity, and we'll create another C# script and call it item controller, just so then we can create something which will actually find the items that we've got in here. So we'll go to there, we'll say square brackets serialized field, we'll say private bool, we'll set this to armor, we'll have another serialized field private bool and set this to cache, because they're the 2 types of objects. We'll also have a serialized field, we'll also have a square bracket serialized field private float item value. Then we're going to have a public void, so we want to access this one, an object interaction with 2 brackets, then 2 curly brackets below, and we'll say that if that we've selected the armor object, or if we've set that within this script, we'll say that we want to say that our UI controller needs to update, and then what we can do is say game object dot set active in brackets is false, so we turn this item off. And then if it's the other one, we'll say that if it's cache, then we'll add the quotes before, and we'll add the other UI controller update and then again we'll set this equal to false. So this is something that we can reference in our other script. So if we go back into our player script, we can unhide the raycasted object. You can see that now item controller exists, and we can now say that raycasted object dot object interaction, because we made it a public method. And then you can see that because we've already found it, we can access that variable because we've already filled that variable in with that script that we found based on the object that we look at. So now we're going to go back into Unity, and we're going to create our controller to control all our things that we're going to do. So you could call this UI controller, you could call this armor controller, whatever you want. So I'll just call this UI controller, so it controls the UI for this, but you could be more specific if you want. What we're going to want to do is we'll have a serialized field, and we'll have this a private string, and we're going to have a player name because we wanted to be able to set the player's name. We'll have a serialized field private color, and we'll have this as name color because you actually could set the color of the name if you really wanted to, and then have a public flow of player cache because we're going to want to access this. Then we can have everything to do with our health down here, and we'll say that we have a public float current health value, in square brackets serialized field private float max health bars is equal to 100f with a semicolon, and we'll have a private float current health timer because we're going to make sure that we say how long it takes before we can regenerate our health. We'll have another serialized field private float max health timer, and then a public bool regen health, so when we can regen it, and public bool in damage area. Then we're going to have things for the armor amounts, and again we're going to have something public float current armor value, then public float player armor amount, and then have a serialized field private float current max armor timer, and then a private float current armor timer. And we're nearly there. We'll say that in serialized field we're going to have a key that we want to set. We'll say that private key code, and then we'll have this as equip armor key, because this is how you can do an input. And then the last one is some references to the actual UIs that we're going to use. So we use the namespace again using Unity engine.ui at the top. Then what we can create is the references to all our text and image objects. So we'll have one for the name UI, the cache UI, the armor amount, and the 4 different health, 1 for normal and 3 for 2 sets of armor, because they're the things that we're going to specifically affect on the actual UI itself. So then with this object, I like to make it a static variable, so then we can access this outside of this script without having to reference it. It just means that if there's only one of these controllers that is going to exist, you can do it like this. So I like to write public static UI controller, so you give the name of the script, which is the type that you're going to give, and then you can just call this instance, and then you can say in the awake method, you can say that if instance is not equal to null, then you can have something there to potentially destroying it if you need to, and then we can say that else instance equals this. So just like that, and it makes it an instance for us. And then in this also, in this awake, you can set that current health timer is equal to the maximum health timer when we start, that the current armor timer is equal to the maximum armor timer, and then we would want to do something like update UI when we first start, just to be sure when we start the game. But we don't need that just yet. We want to create a public void. This was for updating our armor. So public void update armor amount. Then we'll add a parameter of float armor value. Then we'll add 2 curly brackets below and say that player armor amount plus equals the armor value that we're going to pass into this script, and we'll say that armor amount dot text, so that'll be our UI. We'll say that equals the player armor amount dot toString in quotes 0 with a semicolon. So this means that we're going to get the UI for this and set it equal to the player armor amount, so the current armor, the amount we've just set, and set it equal to a string value, and set it equal to a string value because a text in the UI is a string and the player amount was a float or an integer. And we need to do pretty much the same thing, so we'll copy that method, paste it down below, and then we'll say that this time we can do update cache UI, something like this, and then we'll have float cache value, and then we'll say that player cache plus equals the cache value that we've specified just here, and then we'll say that the cache UI.text is equal to the player cache dot toString. So what we can do is we can go back to our item controller, and we can see that we had the one. If we've got an armor, we can say that now here UI controller dot instance dot update armor value or update armor amount, and we can just specify the item value that we created here, which will pass into the parameter of that other object because it's an integer like we wanted for that other script. And similarly, we can say UI controller dot instance dot update cache UI, and then in brackets again we can have item value. So what these do is these just reference that UI controller, and they just call these two scripts and pass in a parameter which fills in this logic for us. So now what we can write is void update, and we can have a check to see that if where regenning health is true, then we must need to check the actual values of the health itself. So now we can make a check to check if the health is ever below the maximum. So if we say that current health value is less than is equal to the maximum health bars, then we'll add 2 curly brackets below and say that current health timer minus equals time dot delta time. So this is going to tick down based on the frame rate we've got, so it'll tick down and it'll have the timer, so how long it'll take to actually regen. Then we'll say under here that if the current health timer is less than or equal to 0, so at this point if we're regenerating health, so we're not in any gas, and our health is below the maximum, we need to count that down. If the timer's ever equal to 0, then we have 2 curly brackets below there and say that current health value is plus or equal to time.delta time times by 10, or you could create this a variable so you could affect it and make it count up quicker. Then we could do something like updating the UI, because we want to update it when our health is coming back up, but we haven't created that yet. And also we want to say that current health timer is then equal to 0, because we don't want to ever be able to go lower. And then under here we need to make another check at this point and say that if current health value is ever greater than or equal to the maximum health bars, then we'll say that current health timer is equal to the maximum health timer, so we're setting it back to its original, and regen health is equal to false because it'll be maximum. So we're doing this, we're checking inside the other one, because if it's ever below that timer and we're regenerating health, we'll be checking this all of the time as it's going up. Then we want to say that whilst we're checking this, if it ever hits above that maximum amount, we'll say we'll stop. We'll stop doing it and we'll stop doing the initial logic at the top. So now 3 curly brackets below, which will be encapsulating the original if your health is below the maximum health, we're going to have an else statement, and we're going to say that regen health is equal to false and current health timer is equal to maximum health timer. So we're just making sure that it's false if it's actually above that value, so we're not going to need to regenerate any health at all. It'll be absolutely fine. So now down here we're going to do an actual check for, which is at the end of this if region for the regen health, we're going to just do an input. I'll just put a comment there and say this is to check for the input, and we're going to equip the actual thing, the armor itself. So now we can say that if input.get key, because we're going to hold it, we're going to hold the button down to be able to equip it, not just tap it once, because it's what happens in the game. So we'll say that equip armor key, then we'll have 2 curly brackets below and say that if player armor amount is greater than or equal to 1, then we'll add 2 curly brackets below and say that current armor timer minus equals the time.delta time with a semicolon at the end. So we're going to do very similar to what we did with the other object itself, so the other one just above. Then below here we'll check that if current armor timer is less than or equal to 0, then 2 curly brackets below. Then we'll say that if current armor value is less than 300, then we'll add 2 curly brackets below and say that player armor amount minus with a semicolon. Then we're going to check in here if current armor value minus is less than or equal to 99, should I say, then we'll have 2 curly brackets in here which say that the current armor value is equal to 100. And then below these 2 curly brackets we'll have an else if statement, else if the current armor value is ever greater than or equal to 100 and current armor value is less than or equal to 199, then we'll have 2 curly brackets below there and say current armor value is equal to 200, and then below here we'll have an else if statement that current armor value is greater than or equal to 200 and current armor value is less than or equal to 299, then we'll have the curly brackets below and then say current armor value is equal to 300. So we'll set that equal to. So then under here we would have something where we would want to potentially update the UI again, and then we'll say that current armor timer is then equal to the maximum armor timer, because we would have set it back to normal. And we'll just say under here, under 4 curly brackets, which would encapsulate our original if statement for checking the input for the key, we'll do another one which is if input.get key up. So if we ever let go of that, in brackets, equip armor key. So in other ways, the only way we can equip an armor piece is by holding it. If we ever let go of it, we just want to say that current armor timer is then equal to max armor timer. So we're resetting the actual timer again. So we can't just instantly then tap whatever key we want to equip and instantly put the armor on. No, it'll reset and we'll have to hold it for a particular amount of time before we can equip the armor itself. So what this means is if we've got more than one armor in our inventory, we'll count down the timer. If the timer is equal to 0, we're going to check what the current armor value is. If the current armor value is less than 300, so if it's less than 300, it means it's less than the maximum, because if we've got 3 bars, we could equate them to 100 each. We'll knock the player armor down, or the current player armor count, by 1, because minus minus just is minus 1. Then we'll say that if the current armor value is less than or equal to 99, which is 1 health bar. If you imagine, I'll just write thing, you've got 1 health bar which is equal to 100 health, another health bar, so 3 health bars equal to 100 health each. If the first one is equal to 99, it must mean you don't have the other 2, because you can only have up to 300 health. So that means that the current armor value will equal 100, because in the Warzone game in Call of Duty, you have to be at 100% in your first armor, and you will use up an armor plate before you can equip the others. So we'll check that, and then if that's not the case, we'll want to check that if our current armor value is above 100, so in this case, if it's above 100, we must have full on our first armor. And then if it's less than 199, so less than 200, essentially, we must not be full on the second. So we'll set our current armor value equal to 200. And again for the last one, to set it to 300. And then that would mean we're checking what armor values we have. And then we need to update the UIs that we're going to use. So down here, what we're going to do is before the last curly bracket, we're going to do public void update UI with 2 brackets and 2 curly brackets below, and this is where we're going to update everything that we've got. So when we call update UI, we're going to say that player name.ui.text is equal to our player name. So we're going to set that UI equal to whatever name we specify in the inspector. We'll say that name UI.color is equal to the name color, because that's just going to set the color of the UI itself. We'll say that cache UI.text is equal to player cache .toString, and we're writing it in this, and then so that we can just call this method every time we want to update anything in particular, so we don't have to specify in each of these methods in specifically what we should update. We're just going to call one method which will update it all at one time when we specifically want to. Then we'll say that armor amount.text, so for our UI, we'll say that is the player armor amount.toString, and then in quotes is 0, and 0 just means that it's a solid number. So then what we're going to say here, that if current health value is greater than or equal to 1, and we'll say that normal health UI dot fill amount is equal to the current health value divided by the maximum health bars with a semicolon, and then we'll say that if is not in the damage area, then regen health should equal true. Then under here we can say that if current health value is greater than or equal to maximum health bars, then the normal health UI dot fill amount is equal to the maximum health bars divided by the maximum health bars with a semicolon, and we'll say that regen health is equal to false because we won't be able to regen it, and current health timer is equal to the maximum health timer. And then under here, which will be the if statement for the current health, if it's greater than 1, we'll say, then we'll write an else statement and just say that normal health UI dot fill amount equals 0. So in this case, if our current health value is greater than or equal to 1, so if we're still alive at any point, we'll say that we're going to take the normal health UI and we're going to select the fill amount of that image, and we're going to set it equal to the current health value, which could be, let's say in this case, it could be 50, and then the maximum would be 100. So if you do 50 divided by 100, you would get a decimal place value, so you'd get 0.5, which is exactly what we need to make that fill amount, because it was between a value of 0 and 1. So if it's 0.5, you're exactly 50% of your health. And then if you're in the damage area at that point, we want to, not in the damage area, we'll regen the health. If wherever the health is above the maximum, we'll just make sure that the health bars equal maximum. You can't regen the health anymore, and we reset the timer. If your health is ever equal to 0, then you're dead. So we want to do something there. Then under here, we need to do something for setting the actual, very similar to setting the health, but we'll set the armors. Then what we'll say is that if the current armor value is greater than or equal to 1, then we'll have 2 curly brackets below, and we'll say that the armor health UI1 dot fill amount is equal to the current health value divided by the maximum health bars, because we set maximum health bars to 100, so they're all the same. Then we'll say that if current armor value is greater than or equal to the maximum health bars, then we're saying that armor health UI1 dot fill amount is equal to the maximum health bars divided by the maximum health bars with a semicolon. And again here we'll say else, and then in curly brackets we'll say armor health UI1 dot fill amount is equal to 0. So if we're not actually above a specific value, we'll just set the current armor to 0 in the UI. What we'll do then is we can just copy this entire if statement with the else, paste it below here, and we'll say that if it's ever greater than or equal to 101, we'll check this time is the armor health UI2. Then in this case, with the fill amount, we want to say in brackets, we want to say that current armor value minus the maximum health bars, then we divide by the maximum health bars, and then if the current armor value is ever greater than or equal to 200, we'll say that the fill amount bar 2 is the bar minus the bar, and if not, it's equal to 0. So what this means is that we're looking at the armor health bar 2, we're looking at the current armor value minus the max health bars, and then dividing it by the actual maximum health bars 2, so we'll get an accurate value in between for between 100 and 200, and then we'll set it and make sure that we set 2 as well here, because then we'll set it to 0. Otherwise, then what we can do is we can copy this if statement again, paste it below, and we can say that if is ever above 201, we'll say that fill amount 3, and then we'll say current armor value minus 200, because this case is 200. If it's minus 200, this case maximum health bars is 100, and then the other case is you don't need to do anything because it's not above 100. So we'll say the current minus the 200. If it's ever above 300, then it's going to be equal the maximum that it can be if it's 3, and then if not, it's going to set the armor health equal to 0. So that's everything we've written, and what we need to do is we need to, in the awake, we need to update our UI in case we've set something in the inspector at the beginning. We need to update the UI if we're going to regenerate health, and we want to update the UI if we ever adjust our armor. So now back into Unity, we can create one last script, which is going to be a C# script, which will be our damage area. Open up in Visual Studio like so, and then what we're going to do is have a serialized field, private float damage multiplier for how much damage we will do. Then we'll have private void on trigger stay with a collider and other. Then curly brackets will say that if other dot compare tag in quotes in brackets is player with curly brackets below, then we'll say that UI controller dot instance dot in damage area is equal to true. Then UI controller dot instance dot regen health is equal to false. Then we'll say in here if UI controller dot instance dot current armor value is greater than or equal to 0, then the UI controller in the curly brackets will say that instance dot current armor value minus equals the time dot delta time times by the damage multiplier with a quote, and then we'll say UI controller dot instance dot update UI. So we've done all the groundwork, so we can just reference everything really easily from now on. So then we'll have another if statement, and we'll say that if UI controller dot instance dot current armor value is less than or equal to 0 and UI controller dot instance dot current health value is greater than or equal to 0, then we'll do UI controller dot instance dot current health value minus equals time dot delta time times by the damage multiplier. Then again we'll say UI controller dot instance dot update UI with brackets and the quotes, and then under here, which is 3 down, we'll write another private void on trigger, but in this case we're going to have exit, and in the curly brackets we'll say that if other dot compare tag, and we're looking for the player again, we'll add curly brackets and we'll say that UI controller dot instance dot in damage area is equal to false, and UI controller dot instance dot regen health is equal to true. So what this is essentially doing is that if we find the player, we'll say that we're in the damage area and regen health is false. We're checking that if the current armor value is greater than or equal to 0. If that's the case, then we can actually take down the player's health based on the damage multiplier we've got. Then we'll update the armor accordingly. Then we're also checking that whilst we're doing that, if the current armor value is ever less than or equal to 0 and the player's health is greater than or equal to 0, so you must have lost all your armor but you've still got health, then we're going to tick down the health and update the UI. And then when you exit it, you won't be in the damage area anymore and you can regen the health based on our other script, which checks in the update, which when regen health is true, you can then regen it. So now we can go back into Unity, get rid of 2D mode, go to our FPS controller that might be in our scene. Like I said, if you've used this or using another one, you can go to your main camera. You can set player raycast here. You can set the crosshair. So in my case, you could have created a crosshair item, but I'll just add it from my prefabs. All it is a canvas with a crosshair image on it that's really small. So you can just add your crosshair. You can set the layer to exclude to everything for now, and you can set your layer mask interact to interact. You can create a new layer at the top if you need to, and we can set the ray length to 5. Then what we can actually do is create a empty game object, reset the value, and then reset this and call this UI controller, when we'll set our UI controller to that object there. In my pack, I've already got a cache pickup, an armor pickup, and a damage area, like so. And what we can do is, on our damage area, we can put the damage area script. We can set the multiplier to 5, let's say. We can select our armor plate, and we can make sure it's got a box collider. We can add the item controller script, and we'll say that this is armor. It will have a value of 1. We can select our cache, make sure it's got a box collider, it's got item controller on it. We will set it to cache, and we'll say it has a value of 5,000, and make sure both of these objects are tagged as have a tag of pickup, and they have a layer of interact. Our damage area is fine to leave it as is. Make sure that on your player character, on your FPS controller, that you tagged player. And then on the UI controller, we can add our UI controller script. We'll say that our player name is going to be, I'll write this as speed shooter. Then we can set this to an orange. We can say that our player's cache can be at the start, let's say 300. Player's current health can be equal to, let's say 50 as an example. Maximum health bars can be 100. Maximum health timer can be 5. Regenerate health at the beginning, yes. In damage area, no. Current health value, armor value could say it's 200. Player's armor, we can say we've currently got 2. maximum armor timer, we'll say that's 5 as well. We'll say that equip armor key is going to be if we hold G, then we'll equip the armor. And then I'll just quickly go on my battle UI canvas and add all my UI elements to there. So once all those are connected, one thing you should remember on your color name is that you need to make sure that alpha's all the way at 1, or you won't actually see the color. So you can press play at the bottom, you see my name is Speed Shooter, I'm orange. I've got 200 health, because as you can see, that the health was at 50% and it's ticked up and now it's full. We had 300 cash, we've got 2 armors because we set the armor at 200. So if I hold G now, it will, in 5 seconds, once I'm holding that thing, it will take our health down and increase our armor. What we can do is we can pick up the cash, and you can see we've got 5,300 cash. If we pick up the armor, we get an additional armor. If I go into the damage area, it will start doing damage to our armor itself based on the damage multiplier that we get. We can walk away from that, and you can see that we can hold G again. When within that allotted time, we'll be able to equip the armor again. So there you have it. There you have the final stages to programming this, creating the UI and doing everything, and you can extend this to however you want, just neaten it up, spice it up with adding some things to make the inspector much neater. You can download this pack from the Unity Asset Store. I'll leave the link in the description for you to check it out, so you can download it today. And be sure to leave a review on it if you like it, and check out any of my other fantastic assets. So be sure to check out the community Discord, check out my Patreon, and be sure to support the channel by leaving a like and a comment. So thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Cheers.